big thanks to Liam. What's his last name?
I'd have to look at my email.
Big thanks to Liam. I'd have to look at my email.
It's a weird last name.
It is a weird last name. So
this is the AT Banter podcast, a balanced and entertaining look at assistive technology, accessibility, and its importance in people's lives. Join Rob Minot, Ryan Fleury, and Steve Barclay as they banter with people around the world about anything and everything regarding assistive technology and the disability community. Now, on with the show.
hey, and welcome to another episode of AT Banter.
Banter.
My name is Rob Minot, of course. Joining me today, Mr. Ryan Fleury.
Howdy.
Mr. Steve Barclay.
Yo, Adrian.
The cowbell. Nice from the.
Cowbell's a little weak today.
No, he did that from the bottom. That was a trick. That was a trick cowbell.
He snuck that one up on me.
Yeah, I did.
I had to respond quickly. Didn't have time to pull it to the forehand.
Well, boys, here we are.
Year's almost over.
Yeah. How you guys feeling?
Great. Fantastic.
Oh yeah, I'm tired.
I'm terrified.
I'm ready for the break.
I'm watching people walking around hacking and wheezing and snorking, and I'm just trying to avoid getting a cold at this point.
Don't go to the mall this weekend.
No kidding.
Yeah, are you guys all ready for Christmas? Did you guys
we're
have
done.
to go to the mall?
We're done our shopping.
Mostly.
Yeah.
Mostly just little bits and pieces.
Yeah, I actually might do some today at some point.
Yeah.
I've got a few more things to get, but otherwise I think I'm in pretty good shape. But it feels like it's just been, Christmas seems to have just, the fall just disappeared. It was just December all of a sudden, but now December, it's just feeling like a bit of a slog just to get to that, just to get to that break. I don't know what that's about, but of course I think partly for me, I got sick, right? I came down with that cold that you were talking about. It made my life miserable for.
Well, and I think too, everybody's been talking and seeing Christmas-related items since Halloween.
Yeah,
and,
that's a good point.
A lot of us are now like, let's just get this over with. We're done.
You know what? That's a good point. That's a really good point, Ryan. You're right. It feels like such
months.
A long season.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
Yep.
So, anyways,
we love Christmas, but can't wait for it to end. Let's move on.
How is it the British had a parliamentary election that took less time than Christmas?
right? Oh dear. All right. Well, before we get too far down any rabbit holes, hey Ryan,
Rob,
what are we doing today?
Today we are speaking with Liam Smith on Blue. See, I knew I'd blew it the second time.
Blew it.
You suck.
You did.
Today we are doing a follow-up interview with Liam Smith from Bristol Braille on the Canute 360.
Aha. The Canute 360.
It's almost here.
Yeah, that's interesting. Are they? What do we know about their? Are they just about to release it, or what's going on with that?
It's coming.
Yeah,
it's close.
So Ryan, then for people who do not know what the Canute 360 is, what's the deal with it?
The Canute 360 is a multi-line Braille e-reader. So it's 9 lines of, 40 characters per line?
Yep.
Yeah. So 360 dots.
Man, it's a lot of dots.
Or 360 cells, sorry. 9 lines of 40 cells. Yeah.
Man.
So 360 dots. Yeah, I was wrong. That's why I'm not a mathematician.
Yeah.
Yep.
Clearly.
Yeah,
I mean, this is kind of exciting. I mean, we talked to them, last year? Was it last year that we talked to the guys from Canute?
It has to have been last year.
Yeah,
I think so.
Yeah, so it's been a while. So I mean, they've been continuing to develop it, and I remember when we first talked to them.
Well, we've been following along this for since they first announced that they were going to produce a multi-line Braille display.
Yeah.
We've been following to see what was happening and when it was out, and it's nice to see it's finally here.
Yeah. But first, a lull.
Well, if we're going to have lulls, I think we should probably just bring them in then.
Well, I think we can do that.
Joining us now is Liam Smith from Bristol Braille.
Hello.
Hi, Liam. All right, so why don't we get started?
All right, let's get started.
Cool. So my name's Liam. I work in marketing and publicity for Bristol Braille Technology. And over the last sort of several years, we've been developing a product which has become the Canute 360. So the Canute 360 is, we like to say, the world's first commercially available multi-line Braille e-reader. And what we mean by that is it's a device which has an electronic Braille display consisting of 9 lines, each of 40 characters, which is primarily designed as a sort of standalone reading device as opposed to your sort of traditional Braille display. But I'll come a bit more onto that later on. So as I say, we've got a 9-line display, each line of 40 cells or 40 characters, which, as your listeners will know, significantly expands on the number of cells available in a traditional Braille display. So to the best of my knowledge, we are the world's first commercially available multi-line electronic Braille device.
Nice. And we've only been waiting for one of those for about 30 years or so.
So why don't we talk about what are some of the differences between the Canute Braille technology and the traditional Braille displays that we are currently using?
Sure. So traditional Braille displays, which are available on the market at the moment, without going into too many details, they often rely on piezoelectric technologies, with a few notable exceptions. And the way in which they work is that each individual dot, between 6 and 8 dots, obviously per cell, is actuated by an individual motor. So what that means is they become exponentially more expensive very, very quickly. So until the cheapest sort of single line displays on the market at the moment for 20 cells, you're looking probably $500-$600 up to the thousands of dollars for a professional model with 28 dots, 20 or 48 dot cells, etc. The key difference with the Canute technology is we actually use a completely unique mechanism for actuating those dots, which uses essentially less motors. So what that means is we can make a much bigger display without it becoming exponentially more expensive. To use sort of traditional display technologies to make a display the size of the Canute, you'd be looking at somewhere in the region of maybe $15,000-$20,000 in order to sell that at a retail price point. Whereas with the Canute 360, because we've been able to use this new technology, we've got that down to under the sort of $3,000 mark.
Right. Now, what is the feel of the pins like compared to today's technology?
So they're quite sharp. It's more similar to sort of signage Braille than paper Braille. They're certainly not compressible under the fingers. They sort of more like you'd see on a sign, as I say. We've actually put an awful lot of effort and research into the feel of the Braille. It's something we've been working on with users over the last sort of 3 or 4 years to try and get that right. So we've gone through a number of materials. And I can say actually the materials we're using at the moment, we've had really, really positive feedback from, and especially from people in education with children just starting to learn to read, but also older people with reduced sensitivity, because the dots are that bit firmer, they can't be compressed. They are that little bit easier to read. I might mention as well that the line spacing between the lines is slightly greater than you would find in paper Braille. Now that's it's an artifact of the technology that we use, but actually again user feedback that has been very positive, because obviously with an electronic multi-line display, you don't have the same need to save paper as you would with sort of interline spacing in paper Braille. So it's a more spread out display, but the feedback we've had from readers has been very positive.
So since you've had prototypes out with a bunch of people, I'm sure you've come across some pretty proficient fast Braille readers. What is the refresh rate like compared to traditional Braille displays?
Sure. So to refresh a whole 9 lines takes just under 10 seconds. I think it's something like 9.5 seconds is to do the whole page. Now, I think you've seen an earlier prototype, Ryan, and the first line, it refreshes line by line. So the first line refreshes, then the second line, then the third line. You'd have to be a very, very quick Braille reader to catch up and beat the Canute. So although the time taken to refresh all 9 lines is just over 9 seconds, a shade over 9 seconds, really you can start reading the first line after around the second.
Okay. Yeah, I actually haven't seen one yet. You want to send me one?
We've got 2 on order.
I thought you might have seen one at Season. I apologise.
No, it's all right. Steve says we have 2 on order. So
Yeah, I saw them at Season.
So one of the other questions I've had from people that are interested in the product is currently I believe that it has to be plugged in. Is there plans to have an external battery pack so you can take it with you?
Absolutely, yes. So that's one of the first things we'll be developing once we've got the first Canutes out the doors of our workshop in the next couple of days. Really, we've got quite a small team. I don't know if your listeners know, we're a not-for-profit company, so there's only sort of 10 of us working in the office in Bristol, and a couple of other people elsewhere. So it's really been a process of prioritising the features which our users found the most useful. So obviously, developing an external battery at the same time as we're trying to develop a multi-line Braille display, that then becomes quite a complicated proposition. As soon as we are in the shipping out Canutes in the next couple of days, next couple of weeks, the attention of the R&D team, the research and development team, is going to shift towards the development of an external battery.
Okay, so currently is there an option for an external battery or no? So
currently, no. It's mains powered only.
Okay.
Although actually we've done some testing in the office, and the Canute will run quite happily off a standard laptop power bank as well.
Okay, great. Well, it looks like I'm going to hog the show, so I'm going to keep going.
Keep going, man.
So one of the other things I've been wondering about is, and we can come back around to this later if we want, but using the Canute as a Braille display, does it have, or will it have at some point, Wi-Fi or Bluetooth? Is it able to be used as a traditional Braille display with a screen reader?
So to take your sort of second question first, we don't have Wi-Fi or Bluetooth connectivity. The reason is at the moment we don't have a 6-key Perkins keyboard, or a Braille input keyboard, I should say. So obviously trying to type a Wi-Fi password with upper and lower case and all that, and special characters using 3 buttons on the front and 9 buttons down the side would be quite difficult.
Right.
What we do have is a number of USB ports, USB-A and USB-C. So it will be able to connect by cable to a computer. So at the moment, when we ship the first Canutes, there is no screen reader support, but we've just we've nearly completed our first production run of 100 Canute 360 models, and one of those, with very kind help from Google, actually, is going out to the guys at NV Access to develop an NVDA driver for the Canute. So we're hoping actually we'll see the first prototypes back from those guys fairly quickly, and then when we have a usable driver for the Canute with NVDA, we'll be shipping that out to all our existing customers as a free update, and obviously any Canutes that then people purchase will have that already installed. And it's quite an interesting question, because until now there hasn't been a multi-line Braille display on the market. So there's a lot of questions about how do we take the Braille output from a screen reader program and render it in a way that's sensible on the Canute and also that's useful. So there's a lot of design questions to be made, and it's very exciting because we are the first company to release a product like this. We're getting to have a real say in that conversation. That's a very exciting thing to be a part of.
Yeah, and I think that's really going to excite a lot more people than just a dedicated Braille e-reader. Being able to use it as a multifunctional device is going to be a huge asset.
Yeah.
Exciting. Woo. So storage on the e-reader, is it just a traditional standard SD card, or is it a mini SD card?
It's just a traditional SD card, or you can also use a USB thumb drive, and you can use any size you want. So you can literally fit on a standard SD card, say a 12 gig SD card or whatever. You can fit thousands of books in Braille. To give you to give you an example, sort of a Harry Potter book in a BRF file is probably about 150 kilobytes. Sorry. So really, with just an SD card or a USB thumb drive, you can store an entire Braille library that way.
Wow.
You need an aircraft hangar sort of thing to keep that number of Braille books in hard copy.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's no audio component to the e-reader, is there?
No, so not at the moment. I mean, this is something we've sort of future-proofed. You'll notice when you receive your Canutes, and your listeners will notice when they try one or receive theirs, that there is a 3.5mm audio out jack built into the body. So it's something we could add in future. As I say, because we're a small team and a not-for-profit, we've had to really hone in on the areas that our customers really wanted on the core technologies. But we will be releasing again in the coming months an open source API to allow people to talk to the Canute, and I'm sure there's things your listeners can, and others can do in terms of adding functionalities of their own.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I'm done, boys. Look at your list of questions. See what I missed.
You didn't miss anything. You hit them all.
I'll have to look at my list, see if I've got all my talking points in.
Oh, I'm sure as soon as we hang up the call, I'll come up with another 5. But
yes, it's always the way.
So I know we've got 2 units coming from this initial run.
Yep.
Is your next run of them going to be a bigger run than 100, or are you doing another run of 100?
So we're quite deliberately starting small because we're not a new company. This is the first product that we've had out on the market. So there's a lot of learning for us as well as our factory, which is in Wales, just over the water from Bristol, another part of the UK. And there's 2 aspects. There's the sort of the design, or 3 aspects even. There's the design, getting the design right. And then actually taking that design from a design we manufacture in small batches in our workshop. So we've made runs of 5 machines or 10 machines before. Taking that to an external factory in Wales with a set of instructions like a model kit, and saying, okay, make us 100 of these, and getting that process right. And then there's the quality control process after that, because you've got your 100 machines, but actually do they meet our specifications? What's been going wrong during the assembly process? And that's sort of the stage we're at. We're at the quality control stage now in our first production run, and the early results, or the results coming back now, they're not so much early results now, are very positive. So our next batch again in early 2020 will be another smaller production run of around 100 machines, and then we will be ramping up as we feel confident. But the most important thing is obviously we need to deliver a product to our customers which is up to the standards they expect. And until we're confident that we can do that, we're not going to be producing thousands of these until we're 100% confident that we can produce 1,000 to the same high standards as we can produce 100.
Right.
Just as we haven't produced 100 until we're confident we can produce them to the same standards as we can produce 5.
What is it why do you think it took so long for something like the Canute 360 to sort of be developed? It seems really intuitive, and it seems really very important in terms of Braille literacy. We've been sort of stuck in the same place in terms of electronic Braille for many, many years. Why do you think that is?
So I think there's a couple of reasons. As I mentioned, we use our own sort of proprietary technology, and the basic sort of idea of that's quite simple. But in terms of fine tuning it and going from a sort of prototype that works in a workshop on a one-off to a finalized product, that's been a very, very complicated process. It's taken a long time and a lot of effort. And as I mentioned, I don't think the sort of current existing technologies, I don't think scale well to a multi-line Braille display. So you're asking essentially to develop a new technology.
Right.
I do think there's certainly an element of other companies are sort of quite comfortable in what they're doing. They've got the markets, and what they're doing is working well for them. And actually investing in something like this is it's a risk to take if you've got a successful business ongoing. So I think it's been a long time coming, and I think it's we're seeing, I don't know if you guys agree, but certainly in the UK, I think we're seeing a bit of a resurgence in Braille over the last sort of 2 or 3 years. Other fantastic products like the Orbit Reader coming out. And I think the market really now is crying out for something like this. But I think as we are a not-for-profit company, we're very small, and we've been able to sort of the development phase we've been able to do on quite a tight budget for what we've been offering. I think it's taken sort of a small and newer company as well, rather than one of the sort of the established AT companies to sort of come out with that as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, I know certainly here Braille literacy is something that's very important to the community, and something that has been a little bit of an uphill battle. I think partly due to some of the existing technologies that, you know, certain people maybe think could replace Braille. But also just, you know, the price point for some of the electronic Braille devices are just out of people's reach a lot of the time.
Yeah, and I mean that was really when Ed, my boss, our managing director, started the company. That second point, the price point, was the key thing that he felt was hugely important. That actually it's, you know, you can. There are companies that have sold 1 or 2 multi-line Braille displays before, but that might cost $10,000, $15,000, $20,000. Now at that price point, it's not even. It's not even something probably a specialized, a very well-resourced specialized school for the blind can afford. It might be, you know, a university research department. So actually, in terms of reaching people who need these technologies, that hasn't really made the impact.
Right.
I guess to take your first point about Braille literacy, there's quite a glib answer that we sometimes give to that question. And that's actually that using today's technology with screen readers and sort of text, speech to text inputs.
Right.
You could make the argument that a sighted child doesn't need to learn to reprint. You know, they can use audio, they can use dictation, and they can complete their schooling that way. Now, I don't think anyone would make that argument, which is why I find it slightly bizarre that people make that argument for blind children, because those skills from reading, whether that be reading Braille or reading print, are just so crucial in terms of learning about structure, in terms of learning about spelling and grammar, and you really don't get that sort of appreciation and layout. I don't think with audio. We're certainly not arguing that you know, Braille is going to, you know, replace audio. Both have their place, but I think really we're seeing a sort of realization now, particularly over the last couple of years, that Braille literacy is still as relevant, or even in fact in the modern workplace, you know, more relevant than ever. Almost all professional jobs I can think of require you to be able to structure emails, to write reports, that sort of thing, and without an appreciation of the written word, whether that be through print or through Braille, you know, forget learning some of those skills.
That's right.
If you loaded a Braille book that had, like, you know, mathematics symbols or graphs in it, will the e-reader render those in such a way that you'd be able to kind of get an idea of a shape or something, or a math formula? Or
so that's an interesting question. We have worked on some sort of basic tactile graphics and graphing applications for the Canute. So because we've got slightly greater line spacing, and obviously, as you know, and your listeners know, Braille dots aren't evenly spaced, to get an accurate representation of, say, a graph of a sine function is difficult. But what you can do is you can interpret that information. So we've written little scripts that turn images and graphs into sort of diagrams that can be interpreted on the Canute automatically. These are just office toys, by the way. They're not really things we're going to release. We've been sort of testing what we can do with this technology. And we've been using sort of, to get around that, we've been using symbols and labels. So, for example, you can draw a map of a local area, and you can use, say, the letter A.1 for one road, letter B.1 and 1 and 2 for another road. Then you'd have a key down the left-hand side that says, okay, when you see a letter A, it's this road. When you see a letter B, it's that road. You can take that into diagrams of shapes and angles and triangles and all sorts. So in terms of sort of one-to-one representations, I think you're still probably going to want swell paper or something like that to draw a perfect graph of sine wave.
Right.
But sort of more illustrative examples of concepts, I think the Canute is really quite effective at.
One of the things that people ask about with the Canute is mathematical formulas and lining up mathematical formulas. Has there been much work done on that front?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned, the Canute at the moment is an e-reading device, a standalone e-reader. So it will display whatever is put into it. If you have a BRF, a Braille ready format with your file with your equations all lined up how you'd like them, they will display exactly as they are in the file on the Canute. And that for us has been one of the real sort of advantages of taking this approach at first of using pre-formatted Braille files rather than screen reader Braille input like other displays, because you can display that exactly as you'd like it. So as you mentioned, that's brilliant for things like mathematical formulas, but also for cases like Braille music, computer code, those sort of things where the sort of the spatial information, the way things are laid out, really does communicate almost as much meaning as the content itself. Where it sort of is on the page. That's an area where we are really hopeful about the Canutes. Maths departments in schools, maths departments in universities, that sort of thing. As an aside, it's actually been really encouraging as we've been running our pre-order program, the number of musicians who've pre-ordered the Canute, and actually in terms of people who Braille music enthusiasts and people who use Braille music, they really have been crying out for something like the Canute for a long time. Because obviously at the moment, every time they want to learn a new piece or look at a new piece, you're going to have to emboss that out onto paper. Now with the Canute, you can take it and read it almost as you go. So those really are the applications. As much as it makes a larger page obviously makes reading a novel easier and a much more pleasant experience. But for information where that spatial information is just so important, and that's where the Canute really comes into its own.
So for those people who may not be familiar with the Canute and the process that you guys have sort of been going through, give us an idea of just how long have you guys been working on developing this particular product, like from, on paper to, right now, being sort of right on the cusp of having this first release?
So we've been developing Canute technologies since 2012. We've gone through a number of design iterations, a couple of different technologies. So the sort of the Canutes being the shape it is now and the sort of the size and the look it is now has probably taken us about the last sort of 2 or 3 weeks. 2 or 3 years, sorry, I do apologise.
It's like, wow.
From our first sort of pre-production ideas of what this product's going to look like to the final thing. So I joined Bristol Braille 2.5 years ago, and when I joined, it was about 6 months before we had the first prototypes of what has now become the Canute 360. So when I joined, the Canute was a wooden box. It was probably, probably 50 centimeters one way, 30 centimeters the other way, and probably about sort of 10 or 12 centimeters thick. It was a big wooden box, very, very weighty. And actually, I remember when we used to send prototypes out to things like CSUN or to for people to review in America, or Canada, or even just around the UK, we used to actually buy cases that bands use, professional sort of musicians use to carry guitar amps around the world, fit them out with foam and stick the Canute into the case. So we've come down from there to obviously what is quite a small, sleek desktop device, and that's really great credit to the team, because as I mentioned, we're a very small not-for-profit company. Right. So throughout most of that development period, we've been reliant on sort of a core team of freelance, mostly engineers, computer programmers, working 3 or 4 day weeks. So it really has been a labour of love, but we're incredibly proud of the sort of journey we've been on, and now to see the Canutes literally coming off a production line in a big factory in Wales in the hundreds is just a really amazing feeling.
And what are the dimensions and weight of the unit now?
the weight's about 1.5 kilos. So it's sort of it's a desktop device for sure, but it's roughly comparable to sort of a high-end laptop, a MacBook Pro, or that sort of thing. In terms of dimensions, you're looking at 36 centimeters by 18 centimeters by 4 centimeters, and that in inches would be 14 inches by 7 inches by about 1.5 inches. So it's probably comparable to a MacBook Pro, but it's a bit smaller than a laptop, a bit thicker than a laptop, and about 1.5 kilos. I've travelled all around the UK with it on the train, on public transport. I don't drive. And it's never presented a huge problem to me. But at the same time, it's not a device realistically you're going to sit reading on the beach or on the bus, on the train, on the aeroplane. It's a desktop device.
Can you talk to us a little bit about some use case studies? Where do you see the Canute really making an impact?
Right, so that's quite an interesting question because, as I say, is the first manufacturer of a multi-line Braille display, and I think certainly not very likely to be the last. It's really interesting to have a sort of a stake and a say in sort of defining what the use cases might be for a multi-line Braille display. So right off the bat, I can give you just from our people who've pre-ordered that one of the nicest surprises for us, as I mentioned earlier, was a number of Braille musicians or Braille reading musicians who've been excited about the Canute and the opportunities for multi-line Braille, reading a melody and a chord part at the same time, or lyrics and chords at the same time. Also, people, any sort of tabular information. So there's an awful lot of information where, as I mentioned earlier, the white space communicates almost as much to you as the text itself. So to take an example, a bank statement, my wages go in this day, my rent goes out that day, so I've got this much money in between to spend on beer, sort of thing. So we've seen a lot of interest from schools, obviously, and from universities, sort of local associations. One of our first pre-order customers is a lady who works in the UK as a computer programmer. She's a sort of an old friend of the team. Now her job involves checking a lot of log files, which at the moment she uses a screen reader and a single line display. So that workflow works for her, but obviously it's quite a frustrating way to review a huge body of text where the context is important. So for cases like that, I think the Canute's really, really, really valuable. But as I say, I think schools, math lessons, just being able to lay out an equation, electronically the same way as it is on paper. To give you an example, I don't have figures on hand for Canada or the US, but in the UK, a high school leaving exam, only 8% of textbooks in science, technology, engineering, and maths subjects are currently published in Braille. Now that represents an enormous barrier to access for students who rely on Braille to access that information. Now with Canute 360 and something like Duxbury software, as long as an electronic file exists of that textbook, you can then convert it into Braille. So you can drastically increase the amount of content that's available. And, even at the other end of the spectrum, if you imagine a Braille reading child in a sort of mainstream setting, not in a specialist school for the blind, in a sort of a mainstream school, with the best will in the world, there's only so many Braille books that a school can hold, because as we mentioned earlier, they're so bulky. I think Harry Potter takes up 7 or 8 volumes in Braille books, which, even if it's transcribed and available, takes up an awful amount of space. Now with Bookshare, which is available to all schools that have visually impaired children on the roll and a Canute, you can potentially access almost any title that's available. So now a child, rather than being limited to the books that are available at their school, they can read what they want. If they want to read a book about unicorns, they can read a book about unicorns. If they want to read a book about whatever, they can read that book. So it drastically increases the amount of literature potentially available to a younger child, to hopefully engender that sort of love of reading, which is just so important. So I guess the question's still open. We haven't We haven't found all of the use cases, yes, I'm sure, but particularly, Braille enthusiasts, Braille musicians, people into computer programming, that sort of thing, as well as sort of in the education settings from the very earliest years to sort of advanced degree level mathematics. I think it's there's a use case for the Canute in all those settings, which is very exciting actually, to have developed a product that's usable from a 4-year-old child to a 24-year-old master's student in advanced mathematics. That's a very exciting thing to be a part of.
Yeah, I mean, do we see a time when something like the Canute, if not the Canute, would just be able to replace an actual brailled textbook? I mean, we have agencies here that, their only job is to actually produce brailled versions of school books, which, to great cost, I'm sure. Something like the Canute, is it possible to sort of revolutionize things to a point where maybe we wouldn't have to actually be doing that? We could just literally have these electronic readers in place of braille textbooks.
Yeah, just email a file.
Yeah. I mean, that's a really interesting question. I'm limited to how sort of far I can go into this, but we're certainly talking to a number of organisations in a number of countries, particularly actually in sort of the developing world, interestingly enough, about that very concept, about actually we're embossing these hard copy braille books and sending them out. Actually, would it not be more cost effective to use Canutes and digital distribution to distribute these files, particularly into sort of quite remote areas? I think there is a question, isn't there, of how far that approach would be ultimately desirable. Not to talk us out the market, but I mean, if you take the example of ebooks are fantastic. I read ebooks all the time, but there is still definitely a case for paper books, and I wouldn't want to suggest that we sort of live in a world where paper braille ceases to exist. Because it's a preference thing, but I think absolutely for titles that as I mentioned, those textbooks that haven't been transcribed into hard copy braille, or things that are out of print, or things that are more sort of niche and aren't available in braille. The fact that any electronic file can be converted into a braille format and sent to a Canute remotely, absolutely, yeah, that's it so drastically increases the amount of titles that are available. I think it'd be crazy not to be very excited about that.
That's right. I mean, I'm sure that and Steve, you might have some insight into this, but like the process of taking a textbook, for example, and converting that into braille to a braille copy for a student can take months. How long is that process?
It can, yeah. It just depends on how complicated the book is, right?
Yeah.
If there's diagrams and things that you've got to provide alt format for, that can take a lot of time.
I think the use case study's off the charts in terms of stuff like textbooks, for sure. I know I get into that argument all the time about e-books as well. Some people just like to have a physical book in their hand, but I think that, in this case, we're talking about, I think that the pros far outweigh any sort of, attachment to say a physical book, like the fact that you could store so much more.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm a print reader myself, but I use an iPhone, so the fact that I can go into the iBooks app and download almost any book I want at the touch of a button without having to walk into town and go to the bookshop and see if they've got what I want. I read almost all my books now in electronic format on my iPhone. So you're completely right. I mean, to take your point about time, obviously, until screen readers become a lot more advanced, screen reader braille output becomes a lot more advanced than it is at the moment. You're still going to have that transcription process. Sure. Electronic transcription is still things like Duxbury are very, very good, but you are still going to need someone to look over the transcription, and as you say, producing diagrams. But you are taking out that step of physically embossing and producing. If you imagine a long law textbook or physics textbook, for example, might take up so many volumes of braille, just the cost of that paper in and of itself, you're probably going to end up with the saving with the Canute.
Yep.
Okay, here's the $1 million question.
Ooh.
Durability and drop test.
Do you know? So surprisingly durable. Surprisingly durable. I think to experience on this one. So I've personally travelled with the Canute sort of all around the country, sort of all around Europe, really. I take the Canute on trains, on buses. I don't drive myself, so it's been. Should we say it's been bashed about, and we haven't had any sort of ill effects from that. I mean, the most dramatic example is I was in London for an event that was organised by quite a small charity who's hired out a sort of small community venue in London. So I turned up to this event. I just battled through the tube at rush hour in London, which if any of your listeners have ever tried the Northern Line in the middle of summer through the city of London, it's quite an experience at sort of 8 o'clock in the morning. Get to this event, set up the Canute on a table. I actually just finished giving a demonstration to someone, and it was one of those sort of fold-up tables, but the legs hadn't locked into place properly. So the legs gave way and the Canute went skidding right across the room. And I thought, right, I'm for it now. This is my job gone. This is the only Canute. At the time, it was the only Canute we had. That was, it was when we first had these new prototypes. Picked it up, dusted it off, plugged it back in, and it worked fine. I mean, obviously, it's not. We're not encouraging anyone to eat their sandwiches over it or spill their drinks into it. We found, even in terms of sort of guide dog hairs and things like that, or bits of detritus, because of the way the mechanism works, it tends to collect quite nicely at the bottom. So it is a robust device. I'd say it's comparable in robustness to a laptop. Obviously, if you drop it from a great height onto a hard concrete floor, you're going to have problems.
Right.
But certainly, our testing and my travelling around with it and swinging it into train doors and that sort of thing hasn't done it any harm.
Well, the true test is when we get ours and we give it to Ryan.
That's right.
That's right. We'll need a ruggedized case for it.
Yeah, Ryan can break anything.
I'll make sure we pack it in plenty of polystyrene, don't worry.
Maybe that's what we should do. Maybe we should pack Ryan in polystyrene.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we do. I should ask. We have like quite a nicely designed sort of cardboard box that will come delivered in, which should protect it very nicely during shipping. It's got various compartments for the manuals and for the Canute and for the power supply, etc.
Well, we're excited. It's we're just waiting for ours to come in.
We'll have it out to you hopefully in the next couple of days. Obviously, shipping over Christmas is what it is.
Yeah.
The Canutes are rolling off the production line thick and fast now. It's just a case of going through the quality control process. And by the way, that's been quite an interesting problem to solve, the quality control process. Is the factory were making them at a very very skilled team of people, but they have no particular experience with Braille.
Right.
And to come up with tests to test the reliability of the Braille that don't require any baseline knowledge of Braille has been quite a challenge. I can't go into exactly how we've solved it, but there's been some very clever use of some off-the-shelf desktop technology by one of our engineers, and the early results are very, very promising, or the results are very, very promising.
Well, Liam, is there anything that you'd like to cover that we've missed?
We've got the user manual available on our website, as well as a full list of distributors on there.
Sure, sir. Where can they find that?
So the full manual is at www.bristolbraille.co.uk/support, and there's a link there to access the full manual.
Right.
If you go to www.bristolbraille.co.uk/pre-order, you can find a full list of all of our distributors for whatever market you happen to be in. And you can also sign up to our mailing list on the website or on Twitter. It's at Bristol_Braille. Bristol, by the way, is spelt BRISTOL.
And we will make sure we include all those links in our show notes as well.
Thank you ever so much.
And we'll even add in that people who are listening that are in Canada, they can also pre-order the Canute 360 at this place called Canadian Assistive Technology that we'll be sure to include a link to in the show notes
Absolutely.
as well. What kind of reception have you got, when you've gone out and shown it to different at different shows and stuff?
Right. Yeah, that's a really interesting question. As I said, I've been working at Bristol Braille 2.5 years now. And I didn't have, to be honest with you, I had no real experience in the industry but before then. And one of the great pleasures of my job is that I do get to travel out to shows around the UK and around Europe and demonstrate the Canute 360 to people. And I've taken, Canutes from quite rough prototypes through to what is now a finished saleable product. And it's just been amazing to sort of see that development. So, I mean, one of the first things, obviously, is people have never seen a multi-line Braille display before. So even showing someone something very, very simple at a demonstration like a sports table or an example bank statement, it's really amazing to see how sort of people's faces almost light up when they sort of think about it and realise the possibilities for things that they're interested in that they could look at. That's really quite a humbling experience to be sort of to be showing off something so new that people haven't seen before. And I guess particularly, over the last sort of 6 months or so, the team have put an enormous amount of effort into ironing out the last bugs and, reducing the noise and speeding up the refresh rate and making all these sort of changes that you make when you're going from a prototype device to a finished product. Now, recently I was at a show in London, a different show to the one that I dropped the Canute off the table at, called Site City, which is a big Site Village. Sorry, I apologise. Which is probably the UK's largest assistive technology show, particularly for visual impairments. So there's a lot of people from a lot of different companies, and a lot of people who, have been pretty harsh critics at times, have certainly told us areas that they think, we should improve, and also people from other larger, more established companies who have come and seen us and said, well, lovely that you got it, but, we'd like to see it on sale. You've got a prototype here. And actually to receive feedback from those sort of people who we've met, periodically every couple of months, every couple of years, and have seen this grow, saying actually, what a fantastic product we've now got on the table in front of us. That's a really lovely feeling. And to be at this event with, as I say, we had 2 Canutes there. My colleague Steph, she brought her personal Canute, which is her own machine she uses at home. Along, so we had 2 Canutes on the table with us, and to have queues of people queuing up to see them and people from other companies coming and congratulating us on being at a stage where we've got 2 products or 2 versions of a product on the table in front of us was a really amazing experience.
Well, listen, hey, we want to thank you so much for taking some time out of your, I guess it's your evening over there.
Yeah, it's 5 to 7 now, so I'm getting a bit hungry. I got to go.
Oh, damn!
I think my sister's made some chicken and rice concoction so I'm going to go and have that and a glass of wine in a minute.
Nice. Sounds perfect. Obviously, it's going to be a big year for you guys next year. So
absolutely, yeah. No, it's we're going to hit the ground running in January and. Reach for the skies, getting these the screen reader support, developing this API, seeing what the community comes up with, obviously going into larger production batches, shipping to we've concentrated very deliberately to begin with in the sort of in markets like the UK and the US and Canada, but actually to think about how we can start thinking about Asia and about India and the developing world. That's really exciting, and I really can't wait to get stuck in. So. Happy holidays to you and your listeners, I guess. I hope we speak to you again in 2020.
I'm sure we will. Let's plan to talk again and touch base again in 2020 and best of luck with the rollout.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, Liam.
All right, thanks, Liam.
No worries. Night. Thanks for having us, guys.
You bet. Take care. Well, it's very, very interesting.
Yeah, are you excited?
I'm excited, but I think what I find really interesting is that the more and more people I talk to, while I'm working on an estimate or, doing tech support, I'll, make small talk with most of the people I'm working with. And I'll ask them, what screen reader are you using? And 90% of them are using NVDA.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting that, sure, NVDA is free, that they're going to them first. It's going to be interesting to see how long it takes for the Dolphin, Supernova, and Jaws, and, whatever else might be out there to come out with a driver, if they decide to come out with a driver.
Yeah, I mean, I think that...
Because usually they license that, don't they, Steve? Typically, it's not just here's a driver, have fun with it.
Well, the driver is going to be very specific to the screen reader, right?
Right.
Unless there's a standard human interface driver for the device.
Which some Braille displays are using now.
Yeah. Although it doesn't, if you want to use it with JAWS, I think you have to have a signed driver.
Right.
You've got to go through freedoms testing
Right.
and such.
Right.
And I think that's mostly for security reasons for their government contracts. But
Right.
NVDA doesn't have that limitation, so should be able to have something out fairly quick, I would think.
Yeah.
I mean, what's your impression of the appetite for this device out there?
I think a lot of people are kind of waiting to see, what it looks like, how reliable it is,
How it feels, how it refreshes.
Yeah, exactly. But I think there's a huge appetite for it.
Yeah.
When I talk to people like, the people who are producing books, for example,
Yeah.
they see this as a really good way to get stuff to kids quickly.
Right. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, and it could be. I believe it'll be a smash success.
In listening to Liam talk, I mean, and the more he talks, I mean, I'm really excited about the product. Like, I think that it could really benefit a lot of people in a lot of different ways.
Well, like you mentioned, they're kind of marketing it as an e-reader, but, I didn't think about, the music Braille aspect of things. The fact that, they are going to support some Braille math to a certain extent is huge as well. So it's not just going to be for recreational reading. It's so much more.
No, I think that, and I think that the more he talked, the more impact I can see in the education market.
Oh yeah.
Than anything else. Certainly more so than casual, the casual reader out there. But what worries me a little bit is just this idea of Braille literacy has been such an uphill battle right now for a lot of reasons. I think a lot of that has to do with the price of electronic Braille, and having a solution. You're talking thousands of dollars, and when people can sort of make do with other technologies and get around really using Braille on a daily basis, I think that's sort of what they end up doing, especially like you said, Ryan, and NVDA is free.
Mm-hmm.
So why spend thousands of dollars on a Braille device when you can just use a screen reader for free? Anything else to say about that?
No, exciting.
Thoughts?
Interesting to take a look at it.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, we should. What we should do maybe once we get our hands on them, is maybe we'll dedicate a little part of the show, a little part of one of the shows to playing with it, and
We'll have to get somebody in here who can read Braille
That's
proficiently.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ryan.
That's not me.
Damn it.
Ryan's too slow. We'd be sitting here listening
Yep.
to him. The fox jumped.
Pretty much.
Man, all these years I thought Ryan was like proficient.
Not at all. Nope.
No,
What?
he can figure it out, but
Not
he's
a
not
proficient.
El Speedy Braille reader.
You know,
not
you gotta guess.
like somebody like a Barry Jennings or something who
Exactly.
can read with two hands and
Yeah, some people read 300 words a minute.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like there's some fast Braille readers out there.
Damn.
Yeah. That was one of the reasons I asked about the refresh rate, because it's going to have to, hopefully it'll keep up with most readers. And he said it would, so.
Yeah, I think it will. I mean, unless you can read, 9 40-cell lines in under 10 seconds, I don't think the refresh rate's going to be that big an issue for using it as an e-reader.
Right.
It might, for somebody who was using it as a screen reader display, that refresh rate might be a point of frustration. If you're using that as your primary device,
Right.
and not using audio out at the same time. But I think in most instances where you would use a device like this, I don't think the refresh rate's going to be that big a deal.
No.
Right.
Especially when you weigh all the positives of having a 9-line reader. I mean, it just opens up your whole world when you're used to having a one line.
Yeah. And this is also the applications that we're seeing for this outside of an e-reader. The things that people are really chuffed about are things like spatial information.
Yeah,
we had Shan write in asking about
Coding
and Python and being able to have it spatially arranged, and it sounds like that's coming, with that NVDA
Right.
component. So, that'll be exciting.
We should underscore too, though, that this is a small team, and they're not for profit, and they've been working on this for 6 years.
A
while,
2012.
So this is pretty huge for them. So fingers crossed. Hope the rollout goes well, and hopefully we'll get our hands on one and two and report back to everybody, and we'll certainly be talking about this again in the new year. So yeah. So speaking of which, this is I think this is like our last regular show of the year.
Nope.
It's not?
Regular show, yeah.
Yeah,
we've
regular
got
show.
Yeah. Interview show, yeah.
Yeah. We've got our Christmas episode coming up, of course, next week. But this is kind of it.
All right. So that's it. It's a wrap.
That's it? That's a wrap? It's not a wrap yet.
That's a wrap. No?
It's not a wrap yet.
Right.
What's wrong with you?
Carry on.
I have to say, hey, Ryan.
Rob.
Where can people find us?
atbanter.com.
They can also drop us an email if they so desire at cowbell@atbanter.com.
Hey, you know what else?
What?
We're on social media.
Oh, I know.
My
Isn't that
favorite.
exciting?
Oh,
I
yeah.
know. I love the social media.
We've got Facebook. We've got
I love the
Twitter. We've
Facebook,
got LinkedIn.
Twitter.
We've got Instagram. We've got all this social media,
We do.
but not Reddit.
We don't have Reddit
We-
yet.
we don't
should get
understand Reddit.
maybe we should. I wonder what you can do to. I think you can just make a subreddit, can't you? I think we can just make an AT Banter subreddit.
We can't even keep up with our Twitter. You're just adding more stuff for us to do.
That's right.
When's the last time we posted to Twitter other than a show?
There's something the other day.
I actually discovered that I still do have a Twitter account. Did I tell you about
No,
this?
you didn't.
I thought I deleted all of my social media, but it turns out my Twitter account is still there.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
I logged onto it the other day, read about 5 items, and then got all stressed and ran screaming away from it.
Aw. Yeah, I don't know. They need to do something about social media. Can we just fix that, please?
Yeah.
Like, not make it a toxic wasteland somehow. Like,
You know
I
who-
really thought they were going to fix the internet by attaching real names to everything, and it just made it worse.
You know who has done some of the best commentary on social media and the consequences of social media?
Who?
South Park.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I've been going through South Park. I had a conversation with somebody a while back, and they were just a huge South Park fan, and I started to go through some of it. And as rude and weird as that show is,
Oh, they're great.
Yeah.
they have some of the most cutting social commentary of any of the shows on TV, and they did one on Yelp reviewers, which was hysterical. But the most recent one I've watched is one on trolling, and
Yes.
it's hysterical. It's
Yeah.
absolutely
Yeah.
hysterical.
I think I know the episodes you're talking about. Yeah. It is a really smart show. I think it's one of the smartest shows out there, and I think that it doesn't get enough credit, just because it spent so much of its time, being that controversial show.
Yeah.
That people like Rick's a great example of people that just got turned off from the sort of the crass humor part of it,
Yeah.
and weren't really able to see past that to actually see what it's saying about social issues.
Yeah.
I mean, it's fascinating to go back and watch older episodes and watch them tackle all these old controversial topics, like. And in a way, the only, and sorry folks for going off on a South Park tangent, but the only downside to that is that the shelf life of South Park is very limited, because a lot of it has to do with like the hot topic of the week.
Right.
Right. Like, I don't know if did you ever watch that documentary that they did on South Park? It was like it was like an hour-long documentary, and it just sort of documented the week process of writing the show animating the show and airing the show.
No.
They literally do that in a week.
Wow.
So that's why a lot of those topics like are really topical. Like it's whatever's sort of going on in.
Yeah. It's the hot button issue of the day.
Yeah. Or what's, what celebrities like losing it or something.
Yeah.
It's all over that. So, you go back and watch something from 10 years ago and they're talking about the Britney Spears meltdown.
Yeah.
Or something, or Miley Cyrus or something. And it's like, yeah, in 20 years, people are going to be like, I don't get that joke. Like, I don't understand that.
Yeah,
So,
quite possibly. Yeah.
But anyways, well, Ryan,
Rob,
what do you think? How do you want to cap it off?
that's it. We're done.
Okay. That's it. We're done. See you next year. No, we'll see you next week for the Christmas show, of course. Thanks everybody for listening, and we'll see everybody next week.
This podcast has been brought to you by Canadian Assistive Technology, providing low vision and blindness solutions across Canada. Find us online at www.canasstech.com. That's CANASSTECH.com. Or call us toll free at 1-844-795-8324. For all your assistive technology servicing needs, call Chaos Technical Services at 778-847-6840 or find them online at chaostechnicalservices.com.
Whoa, look at that. Master of the one take.